My name is Eiki Hrafnsson. I'm Icelandic, but I've lived here for a few years. I want to talk today about cloud volumes, NetApp cloud volumes, and I want to also take you through sort of what we're doing in the newly formed Cloud Data Services business unit here within NetApp. And what I hope to bring to the table here is, update your understanding of NetApp and cloud, and hopefully for those who are watching at home also. So when we talk about cloud, I probably should show you my credentials here. I came over to NetApp just about probably 8 months ago. I'm co-founder of a company called Greencloud. I might have met some of you through the last 7 or 8 years, which I've been traveling the US. But essentially, in Greencloud, we built a public cloud in multiple data centers. And we helped develop some of the core technologies that are used today in private and hybrid clouds. And I've been in this for a long time. This is actually my first day job. I've never done anything else but my own startups. I turned 40 a few weeks ago. And I really love to do software, and specifically automated software. And what we're doing here at NetApp is really exciting to me. And when I say that I'm a data fabric believer, like I say on there, what it really means to me is that I think data management and just data in general is the key ingredient for us to get to that elusive hybrid cloud, multi-cloud application strategy that companies and new development teams are trying to get to. And some of them are getting to it quicker than others, but we think we can really help everybody get to that data fabric that they want. Greencloud was acquired last summer. It was a 7-year-old company before that. We did some things like participate in the core development of Cloud Stack from the beginning. We've contributed to OpenStack, Kubernetes. We ran a public cloud for 4 years, and which included compute, object storage, and users from over 80 different countries. And about 3 years ago or so, we pivoted the company and started selling the software that we made to build a public cloud. And we call that QStack. Since we did that, we've also been working a lot on application orchestration. So that's where the Kubernetes part comes in. But for NetApp, they because of their cloud strategy, the cloud strategy that I have a feeling that we may have influenced a little bit through the years of talking with NetApp, they saw an opportunity in getting the tools that we have, our products, getting the experienced people that we have, and build a foundation for the next generation of NetApp services. So that's sort of what they were gaining out of it, what we were getting out of it, not just from the acquisition side, but there had to be something keeping us here. So personally for myself, having co-founded the company, I was not in a hurry, to get into a day job. Like, I'm a startup guy. I need to have some degree of uncertainty and chaos, because that's kind of where the fun stuff happens. And, settling down in some boring enterprisey company was not really what I was looking forward to. But to my surprise, and I was super happy when we started talking to this new business unit of NetApp, I was so happy to see that we actually do have a cloud-first leadership here in NetApp, all the way up to the top. And the things that we are sort of starting to show the world now are really exciting from a cloud perspective, because the possibilities that they open up are truly new. And the whole industry has been sort of trying to get to this point where they have an easy way of, or the easy button, to get to the cloud, an easy button to get to performance and all that. So we have a vision, and I'm talking like in past tense, we have a vision in Greencloud what DevOps should be. NetApp has a vision of what data management should be, and we figured out that by combining our two, we would have these new cloud data services that I'm going to show you a little bit about later on today. So essentially, what became of Greencloud here is that we are now NetApp Iceland. I actually work out of Seattle, but we're kind of distributed, but the teams have been growing. And now the product that we had before, QStack, its components have become what we call the service delivery engine for future NetApp cloud services. This is a new business unit. I can tell you sort of my perspective on it. We have a lot of ingredients here to make a lot of new cool stuff. And the way I think about it is that, when AWS Web Services were starting, they started with S3. Then they came out with EC2. With S3 and EC2, you can build everything else. Everything else that Amazon has come out with, basically you can build with EC2 and S3. We are trying to get to that point in NetApp where we create those basic services and APIs that fit into the data fabric view that NetApp has, and will enable us to roll out new services and incorporate third-party services and integrate to really make a large solution and ecosystem around these services that we're building. It's all the goal of helping companies transform. And I'm not talking about like in a fluffy, nice sort of PC way of talking about things. I'm talking about like really doing it, really presenting solutions, figuring out how they need to do it and how we can help, and try to automate that and make that available to the masses. So this business unit is really leading the cloud data services strategy, the sales, and we're working directly and physically with the hyperscalers, or the big public cloud providers. So we've got our teams inside like Azure, like AWS. We're working very closely with these providers, the ones that we have announced and the ones that we haven't announced yet. But we're also relying on the sort of excellence of operations from all of the NetApp teams, all of the NetApp business units and the solutions that are already there. But we here in this business unit, we are here to actually support, build, and maintain these services. So we're not just going to pump out some products that somebody tries to install. We're actually going to run it and support it. And lastly, everything we're doing is actually towards evolving the concept of data fabric. And I know data fabric is something that, to me, when I came into NetApp, was like, what is this data fabric? Everybody, like, it's the second word you hear when you come into NetApp. And to me, like, it was a bunch of components that were not necessarily orchestrated fully, right? So right now, with the Greencloud team, NetApp Iceland, as it's called now, and this larger business unit, I think we've become like the pirates of NetApp. This is the flag that Steve Jobs put up at the Apple headquarters in '82. And I think we might become like the Macintosh team of NetApp, and that's kind of what I hope for, and be that change that NetApp needs. So the data fabric, if we talk just a little bit about that, NetApp's data fabric isn't today a product or a service. However, the concept of data fabric is that it's really concentrated on your data and the services that help you migrate, work with it, and effectively make your company more productive, informed in terms of knowing that your data is safe, knowing that it's following compliance rules, and effectively making your company more profitable. Now, that's all very nice and dandy, but data fabric really has to be like the guiding light for all the services that we build, and that's kind of where we are coming from. And I think you'll see, and the picture might start in your head now that, with our new multi-cloud data services, we are really sort of visualizing and making the data fabric tangible for you. And we're trying to set the stage for the future services and the future of the company in the cloud. So when people talk about data fabric, what they really mean is, all of these products here. This is sort of, coming into NetApp, being here for 8 months. I'm still catching up on all the products. I mean, there's so many products here, and there's so many talented people working on these, but we've got to start simplifying a little bit. And so when you look at our products here, and then you look at the services we'll roll out, you start seeing that we'll pick and choose features from these. We'll make new products. But overall, we're just trying to get to that goal of making things easier for the companies that trust us with their money. So the way to think about it now is that NetApp it's not a storage company, it's a data management company. And without sort of blowing the lid off like all the cool stuff we're working on, let me just tell you a little bit about where we will play in the market. And this goes towards is really what I'm talking about is what we will do in the cloud. So if you look at these categories of data management, these are the categories that NetApp will either directly or in partnering have solutions for customers. First one, data volumes, data protection, data integration and orchestration, data and cloud optimization, and then data security and compliance. And I want to talk about 2 of these today, but just to give you an idea like where our current products fit, you'll see that data volumes, obviously there's the on-prem, but I'm specifically going to talk about the cloud. So data volumes in the cloud mean cloud volumes, the services, and ONTAP Cloud, the appliance, in public clouds. On the data protection side, we've got AltaVault. And if you don't know what AltaVault is, basically it's getting your snapshots backed up in public clouds in S3, among other things. And SaaS backup is a new product, or relatively new product from NetApp that used to be called Cloud Control for Office 365. And there we are sort of making a time machine for your SaaS applications. So if you think about backing up Office 365 because an employee that is leaving the company accidentally deleted, the most important files, right? Since this is a SaaS service, it might have a feature to find out what version we were working on before and get back to that. But since this file has been deleted, you might have deleted all the versions of it, you can't get that stuff back. But that's really just the beginning of SaaS backup, because SaaS backup can reach into any type of application you have as a service. So think about Salesforce, think about, with various different services that you would want to get the data from, not just for backup, but for processing it, for doing something with that. So this becomes a key in that particular part of the fabric. And the third thing there I want to tell you a little bit about is data integration and orchestration. And this is something that's really came about with the acquisition of Greencloud. Here we are going to talk about applications, specifically Kubernetes-based applications. APIs for orchestration, and then a product from NetApp that's been around for not a long time either, similar to SaaS backup, called Cloud Sync, which is a file-based sync service that allows you to get data to and from whatever data source. If it's file-based, we can get to it. If it's S3, NFS, CIFS, whatever. All right, we're just going to jump into the couple of things I'm going to talk about. I'm talking about data volumes, and I'm going to talk about applications, orchestration, and integration. So you're probably all familiar with ONTAP Cloud. Does anybody here not know ONTAP Cloud? You probably all heard. Okay, great. So ONTAP Cloud is, or became the softer version of ONTAP, a while ago. So
I think it might be helpful to a couple of people. I think there's probably a couple of people who never, believe it or not, who've never heard of ONTAP.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. Oh, I know how you feel. I've just been here for 8 months. So, all right. So at the core of NetApp, you've got, obviously NetApp started as a shared file appliance, like solve the problem of file sharing, multiple reads, multiple writes, long time ago. The company is 25 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And having built a public cloud from scratch with millions of dollars worth of equipment in multiple data centers and running that for thousands of users, I can tell you storage is hard. It's very hard. You can try collaborating together multiple different solutions, and believe me, we tried pretty much all of them. Most of the stuff that we at Greencloud, when we built our public cloud, was really cutting edge, and those companies ended up being bought, all of them. None of them worked. None of them worked. And it's only when we started to use NetApp that we really saw some real stability and real performance at the same time. And it's kind of strange that you would get that from an older storage company, because they really have followed the differences and the new types of workloads better than people think. So we're talking about cutting edge data scientists working here, creating storage solutions that are super high performance, and at the same time are doing deduplication, so you don't actually need as much storage as you would think, because they can figure out oh, you already stored that, I don't have to store it twice. And they do encryption at the same time, so you're already compliant with some of the standards like GDPR or FIPS and things like that. So ONTAP is the software that's on top of these boxes, but we also made a softer version of that. So you can run ONTAP as a controller in public clouds. So a lot of people, including myself, would ask why would I do that? Why don't I just use EBS, right? Why do I need a storage controller? So the first thing I thought was well, maybe it's just for those NetApp customers, because they need to somehow get to the cloud, and there's probably a good route. I read about it. There's a snap mirror thing. You can actually clone data from your site to the cloud if you're running ONTAP Cloud. But then when I looked into it, I saw that wasn't the only thing. It's actually cheaper and higher performant and more features to use an ONTAP cluster in AWS than to use EBS. Actually, when you get to a certain scale, the ONTAP stuff is just for free. And it's way more performant and got a whole lot of more features than you can ever get from EBS. So it's interesting. And this got me excited. And this kind of probably was the basis for the belief in NetApp that we could do something like cloud volumes. which instead of having a box or an appliance, we've got this service that's on demand, it's API driven, it doesn't look like NetApp at all. Nobody has to know it's NetApp, it just works, and it's super fast, and you get things like instant snapshots, instant restore. These things just don't exist in the public cloud today. Like, you can't do these things in the public cloud, believe me. I've tried, most of you have probably tried some of this stuff as well. So, going from those appliances to, or the physical appliances to the virtual appliance in the public cloud, and now to a fully managed service. And that's what NetApp Cloud Volumes are. So what we're talking about here is file storage, so shared file storage, meaning like you can have multiple servers reading and writing from the same volume, so you don't have to clone data all around. So that's right away, that's a thing that you save a lot of resources. We are offering NFS version 3, NFS version 4, which basically means you add like authentication and stuff on top of that, and SIFs or SMB. So I'll go through after I demo it, I'll sort of go through the use cases so you understand better what this applies to. But a big part of it is, performance. We're talking about super high performance in the public cloud with shared storage, multi-read, multi-write. This hasn't been done before. So,
can I ask a quick question there?
Go ahead.
Obviously, there's already NFS Ready for Azure, which is backed by NetApp.
Yes.
There seems to be another NFS and SMB type service as well. So what's the difference between the two in terms of their integration point with the cloud provider themselves?
There's not. You're talking about the same service. So NetApp Cloud Volumes on Azure is a native service offered by Microsoft. But in the background, it's us and Microsoft that run the service, and we write the code.
So why the name NetApp Cloud Volumes and then a different name for the service in the provider? Is that because it's their branding?
Yes.
Well, you can buy it decoupled from NetApp, right?
Yes.
If you go buy it from Microsoft,
that's
you don't want NetApp storage in your data.
Yeah.
No. So let me explain. So there's a name for Microsoft Enterprise NFS that's provided by NetApp. There's also Cloud Volumes for AWS provided by NetApp. Cloud Volumes is the overall name for all of these. And the reason why we have a common name for them is because we are going to be multi-cloud with this. So whether the service is running on Azure, it's running on AWS or somewhere else, I'll show you how we will manage pretty much all of them.
So my SnapMirror could actually be between two different providers in different cloud environments.
Yep. Yeah, so prominent features here, obviously an open API. We've got a RESTful API, but we also got fully integrated native cloud APIs. What that means is that, like, for example, in the Microsoft service, it's ARM-based. So we sit behind Microsoft's API gateway or API proxy, which means that you get all the security features, you get all the limiting features, you get all the billing features. These services are built by the public clouds, not by NetApp. So that's a huge difference as well, because this just fits right into your cloud spend, and you don't have to think about, I have to go and make a contract with NetApp or something like that. You can just view this as super high performance EFS.
So that's the question I was about to ask you. Does that mean EFS is being treated as not being a success, or do you think that's being seen as a very low level product just for a small amount of file sharing?
I can't, I don't have an opinion on that.
Okay.
I'll talk a little bit about EFS later, but mostly on the usability side of it.
But just on the API piece you mentioned there,
Yes.
that's behind Microsoft's Azure API.
Yes.
But when you're doing this in AWS, then it's your own API. You're not, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And actually, it's actually a level above that as well, because when we're doing the AWS one, and subsequently when we roll out more regions and providers, we are talking about having an API that can share API tokens, so access and authorization, between all of NetApp services, not just Cloud Volumes. So let me just go ahead and demo this for you. Right. Okay. So Cloud Volumes is available right now in both AWS and Azure. I'm going to demo the AWS version, and I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots from the Azure version. Both are well, Azure is in private preview right now, and we're going into public preview in May. And that means that we're going to accept more customers. Right now, we've been basically having companies, small and large, kick the tires, try it, run difficult workloads on it, run small workloads on it. Let's see what happens. And we've been learning from that and figuring out sort of where we go with the service in the near future. On AWS, because that's really our service and controlled completely by us, we are doing a more of a continuous release. So that service gets updated quite often, and not necessarily rolled out in sort of private public preview GA timeframes. So first of all, I log into AWS, and you probably saw I pasted a marketplace link there. And this is a hidden or private marketplace page since we're in private preview, but I wanted to show it to you anyway, because similar to any other service in AWS, you sign up to it through Marketplace. You sign up to it by clicking subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. You can start using the service right away. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now that I've subscribed, that's it. We've notified NetApp that you've subscribed to it. And then when I click this link here, if this was the first time I subscribed, it would just forward me directly. I'm going to be taken to what we call Cloud Central. Now, Cloud Central is where we unify all of our APIs, but it's also where we unify all of our cloud services. And right now, there's only a handful of services in there, but this is where we're going to be rolling out the next version of Cloud Volumes, the multi-cloud stuff, the app orchestration, and a number of other things. So I'm going to log in here. And this uses a single sign-on. So if you have different services, they might have their own site to it and their own console, but you get the idea, like single sign-on. The single sign-on actually works with the NetApp single sign-on. So if you're already a customer, we'll, you don't have to register. We just let you in. But we're definitely, want you to register if you're a new customer and give us a little bit of information about yourself.
Sorry, do you accept federated log logs from NFS or?
So, if you want a technical detail, we're using Auth0. So effectively, we could federate with pretty much anything.
Okay.
But right now, it's basically, the NetApp SSO and a registration. So when you create an account here, that becomes your master account. And what you see here is the UI for Cloud Volumes only. So if I wanted to do, for example, Cloud Sync, I have an option here on the side to jump between these different services. All right. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to create something like a 10 terabyte volume. There's a 100 terabyte limit on the size of the volume now, but we're working towards multi-petabyte per volume. I don't think.
What's imposing the limit? Is it something with the provider? Is it software?
No. It's just we just decided to. It's a virtual limit that we decided to start with, and it has really. It's because of how we architect it in the background, on the back end, versus rather than roll out like hundreds of petabytes right away, we want to roll through public preview and up to GA on these limitations.
So it's more of a gated limit.
It's a gated limit, yeah.
Okay.
So now I subscribed, I logged in. I'm going to go ahead and create a 10 terabyte volume. So I'll call this. I'll just call this machine learning. I give it a name. It's going to generate a unique volume path for me. I can change that to pretty much anything. Kick-ass elated gates, or hungry condescending Volhart. You might sort of find these.
Doesn't sound Nordic or Nordic at all.
Gloomy, trusting Wozniak. I like
Sounds
that.
about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you might recognize these from like the Docker world, right? These are famous scientists and authors, combined with some fun adjectives. Anyway,
That one's incredible.
the reason why we do that is that you want each volume to have a unique path, but you also want it to be humanly understandable, because you don't want to have like a volume that's called 32 letters and dashes. Like, how are you going to communicate that? So better UX here. Anyway, in my account, I only have access to AWS. But here you can see I can select AWS as the region. And this is just in a single region right now. I can also select the time zone. That's kind of the reason why you might want to do that is because when you set snapshots and backups and that sort of thing, you might be thinking like, I want to make backups in the time zone of the customer, not where it's stored. You'll see that I can create a volume directly from a snapshot. This could be from any volume that I've created before, not necessarily from this one, or not. If I wanted to actually revert, I can do that as well. And I can select a service level. If you saw it before, basically in the private preview, we are running at a premium service level. And they're called different things between the cloud providers. But that equates to roughly about 3,000 IOPS per terabyte. I can set the quota here. This is really just the size. I'm not going to do exactly 10 terabytes. I'm just going to wing it here. It should be like that. And the second thing I have to set here, actually don't need to change, but what I can do here is actually configure the volume for what protocol I wanted to expose. And this is actually a multi-protocol select. So I can have a volume that's NFS and CIFS at the same time, which is a huge benefit if you're running both Windows workloads and Linux workloads at the same time. For the AWS service, we've only opened up for NFS. But this is kind of like an ingress rule as well. So here I can add an additional security measure saying like, I only want this instance or this IP or this host name to be able to talk to the volume. This is in addition to what the cloud provider can give you. And then lastly, because we're all about automation, I can actually tell it to create a snapshot policy for this volume right away so that I don't have to manually do that. And this is something that happens asynchronously, meaning that this is happening all the time, and it will let me know, the service will let me know if something goes wrong or if it goes right. Essentially, I can do things like keep 2 snapshots. You can see the explanation here is updating dynamically. So it says keep snapshot every hour on minute 53 and keep 2. So I put 53 because it's 52 now, so I'm going to see if I can create a volume that automatically makes a snapshot of itself.
So while it's doing that, one of the things I
done.
keep thinking about. Okay, it's still
Sorry.
my question.
Go ahead.
No, it's still creating.
Yeah.
So it's setting the network, it's creating the network path. So this runs in the VPC.
And now it's available.
Yes.
Darn it. So one of the challenges that I commonly see is, I mean, this is great in a vacuum, but the reality is with cloud, you have Ingress and Egress charges, right? The data transfer charges.
Not here.
You don't have,
Well, this wouldn't happen, if it's all contained within cloud, you wouldn't have it. But what if I'm kind of going back to that bi-directional connection between something you might have on-prem versus leveraging cloud for storage.
Right.
Or
so the cloud.
you know, where
You're
there's
right. I mean, the
some
cloud
connection between them.
provider might impose some egress charges. There are no ingress charges. So I can stream this.
No
I can
ingress.
stream data.
No.
I can stream data to the cloud into cloud volumes.
But the egress charges make up for the difference.
Yeah.
mean,
Well,
in a lot of
that
ways.
depends if you're going out of the cloud or not.
Right.
I mean, not everything will go back and forth, right?
But how does that differ for any other cloud
No,
storage?
it doesn't. I'm just wondering if there's maybe something that starts to limit the amount, get
Yeah.
smarter about the data that gets transferred,
Yeah.
such that you can limit those charges.
Yeah, and to be clear, I mean,
Right.
the amounts of data, some of it you wouldn't just try and push those bits over the pipe. Like we definitely are. I have no idea if we announced it or not, but we're definitely thinking about like a snowball type situation where you can take a box and basically ship it to cloud volumes.
when we were talking with NetApp, I mean, this was a couple of years ago at least, where we started talking about data fabric. At the time, the idea was that there'd be an ONTAP for cloud instance running in a non-Amazon or non-Azure data center, but they had a high bandwidth connection to an Amazon or an Azure data center, and that would allow customers to avoid egress fees so that they wouldn't have to worry about what they're doing with their data. Is that service still available and this is replacing it, or is this a new service that's going to be offered alongside that?
I'm not familiar with that
NetApp
service
private storage
at
you're
all.
talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
is that
Are you
still-
talking about an NPS?
NPS he's talking about.
So NetApp private storage. So that's still a service that's available.
Okay. This is not replacing that.
No.
Okay.
Could augment it. That
Yeah.
to the point of all this, that whole network egress charge thing really breaks the multi-cloud thing,
Yeah.
which for all of the cloud providers is like, hell yes, I'm going to dig a moat because I don't want, Amazon absolutely doesn't want you to leave, and Azure doesn't want you to leave either.
I don't think it does, because if you're using SnapMirror to replicate the data,
Yeah.
whatever you update when you're in the cloud is going to be the delta changes that you then will pull out, because SnapMirror will keep the sync between the two. So
Right.
it might not be as bad as you think.
The first set of data that you replicate, you've got to be
Well,
careful.
but that's only going in, isn't it? So that's fine.
Well, what you're
coming
saying,
from one, though.
If
what
it's
you're
in one
saying is
cloud
take
to the
two-
other cloud,
take two
it's egress
copies,
from one
send
of
it to each of the take two providers, send the initial load to each of the two providers, and then that way
and
the
then
only
just
thing
do
that ever goes
deltas, yeah.
between are
the things that you've changed. So if you don't change very much,
Yeah.
you've only got a very small.
The only
cloud.
problem with that is if you start creating data in one of
Absolutely,
the cloud
then you've got a
providers.
different scenario. Yes, if it's all unique data being created, then you're going to have to push that across.
And
across
that's
cloud.
the whole. You kind of already had this issue already. Like if I create data in a data center here, and I've got another one on the other side of the planet, moving that over a network takes a long time.
Yep.
So now,
But it is possible. So, and if I've already, like if I'm leasing, like if I buy the line, I don't pay for each bit that runs over the line. I pay for 10 gigabit network connection, and I just pay for 10 gigabit.
So I think
Whereas
you
this, I get
make
to pay
great
for
points
10 bit.
there, and like
Yeah.
I think the key there is how do we drive down that cost, because the cloud provider is going to set a lot of the rules on there. Like everybody's going to have to play by their egress rules, right?
Yeah.
So how can we minimize that? And you made a great point with using something like the protocol for SnapMirror is going to help you with like dedupe. You're not going to be transferring all that data but just the changes. There are other options like cloud backup, which will have deduped and encrypted archives in something like S3 from any one of these data points, whether it's on-prem, cloud volumes, or somewhere else. And those also take up much less and cheaper than doing the pure sort of file-based copy.
They do. It's just the prospect of a data fabric where I have my data wherever I want it to be.
Yep.
Gets killed by this egress thing because I have to be careful about where my data is because of egress. So I can't just have all of my data everywhere.
So you can't.
Unless I want to pay a lot of money for it.
And so there's the egress charges, and there's.
I've debated this for a long time. Do I want my data everywhere? Or do I want my metadata of my data everywhere? And then on access, pay the egress to have the data transported with some delay. Is the real use case for most of these multi-cloud solutions to have the bits and pieces about what data do I have in the enterprise? Or is it literally that I have to have my data everywhere? And it's a tough challenge.
No, I actually don't. I think it's more poignant than that. I don't think you can answer that question in a vacuum, period.
True.
I think you have to understand what is the application, how is the user interacting with the application, where does the data need to be able to support that application, and then that starts to govern your options in terms of how you manage the underlying data set.
When I think of data fabric,
just real quick, the last piece to that is, I do think as you start to move into a cloud-based world, you can't bring those traditional ways of managing data forward.
So I agree. So thinking at this from a large enterprise and being a service provider to internal customers, one customer will have one set of requirements, another one will have another depending on application. What I can level set and say is that I would love to have my data everywhere so that I can serve each individual client as needed, and I can turn knobs to say, okay, in this region of the world, I have 2 petabytes of storage, and I'll replicate data as needed. In this other part of the world, I have 1 terabyte of cache, or whatever the solution is. But the key is, and I think this is one of the gaps I see in NetApp's data fabric vision, is I don't see how you guys are facilitating that metadata conversation of how do I solve the problem of knowing where my data is in the world and what data is it? Yep. And that is, I think, a key to part of becoming a data company.
And I can tell you with high confidence that is exactly where we're going.
Yeah. It's more than just managing the bits.
Yeah. And managing the bits is one thing. Getting to the right applications, getting to the right compute, getting to the right services that offer you new value from your existing data is the important part that we need to solve first.
Yeah.
Regarding the egress site, it depends on where the data is. If the data is centrally located at the customer's place and there's no ingress charges, effectively he can send it to all of the cloud volume services that he can find and pay nothing for that, right? So it only happens when you're talking about egress between cloud providers, because within cloud providers, the egress depends on region, zone. There's a ton of things to think about there. All right, I'll get back on track. Sorry for that. But I like the conversation, and I hope we can continue that later on. So I made a volume. Great. Took probably about 10 seconds. Doing this with any type of service that's out there today would take me probably hours, if not days, to get set up. And now I want to actually use it. So I'm going to mount this volume here in an EC2 instance. So let's go back real quick here. Just so you see me go all the way through. Log here into EC2 and instances. demo, and here's my IP address. Now let me just put this here side by side so you see how easy that is. So clear this, SSH. So I'm gonna just log into this Ubuntu server, running in US West 1. I'm in. Since NFS, I'm gonna use NFS as the protocol. So since that is something that you need to use sudo for here, I'm logged into sudo. So I'm a root user now. So you can see there's nothing there. So if I was doing this from scratch, what I need to do now is copy that command, paste, copy that command, paste. Now, based on the level of performance that I selected, we would show you different mount commands for this, optimized for the workload that you're trying to do. So this might be, for example, high performance database that I'm going to use this for. So copy that, click enter, and my volume is ready for consumption. And you can, like, for those who know something about NetApp and have seen NetApp volumes before and NFS shares, you'll notice the telltale .snapshot folder there. And the cool thing about that is snapshots within NetApp within ONTAP. They're such a cool thing for everything from development to making your applications way faster, to replicating big data sets, bringing them to everybody at once, making a development environment from a production system. There are so many usable things you can do with this because it's instant, right? It's not a backup. Many people might think Snapshot is backup. It's not a backup. There's another service for that. But Snapshot is something like like Time Machine on your Mac. You can go back in time, or you can create something new from that particular day or hour that you made that snapshot. So let's see if there's something in there. Right. So you remember I set the automation to make a snapshot 53 minutes past the hour, right? So now that I've done that, instead of just restoring, making a snapshot and then creating a whole new volume from that, maybe I just need one file. So if I wanted one file from that, I can simply go ahead and copy a file from within the snapshot. Because the snapshot itself is really just a file structure. So that makes it even more capable of helping out operations, helping out development in getting back to that state where everything was fine, or maybe I just want to try that test one more time with the script that I had, or maybe I need to, maybe my Hadoop process failed on that node and I want to restart the job on that node so I can go back to that. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit later about how to get data to that, but let's continue.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Call me cynical. But
We do.
how is this just not putting a storage array on in an AWS data center and putting a nice UI around it?
How is
really
it not?
struggling to see where this is innovative and doing something that's new.
Right. So, good question. It is and is not a storage array in a public cloud. What's really new here is that you have not been able to consume file-based storage at this performance level and API-driven at all in public clouds. That means that some applications, not just enterprise applications,
Could not live there.
that couldn't be there before, right? So that's kind of the big thing. And what you could have done before was, stand up ONTAP Cloud, launch that appliance, but you need a NetApp guy. You need somebody that knows how to set that up, knows how to configure it and all of that, just to get to that point where you can get shared multi-write, multi-read storage.
And that would be possibly subpar for performance because it's just
Absolutely
a machine.
subpar for performance.
Where this is native.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's one other bit as well, which you haven't touched on yet, but you might be going into here, and that's if you look at the way you provision an instance or whatever, you get to select where the storage is going to sit, and you connect it through the actual APIs and the GUI directly. With this, the storage is like a first level feature you can add to an instance or a VM. It's not separate from. It's not like in a VM and separate, which means any functions that you use on that VM, like snapshotting or other things, can be driven by the standard platform APIs, and it will directly talk to the storage as well. So it doesn't have to be done as a separate task. So the two become much more closely integrated. And I'm not sure whether that's what you intend to show as part of this, because
as far as like integration, you saw AWS. That's our service. It's completely our service. It's running, next to Amazon, like in each region right now, with direct connection, versus the Microsoft version of that, which is, part of Azure. Like this is a service that's part of Azure. So you can find it in the marketplace. You create it. You can. I'm just showing you the UI, obviously, because it's hard to show visual nice things to a large crowd with command line and APIs. So the same thing I just did with AWS, I can do on Azure, but behind all of those subscription rules, my Active Directory access, all of the things that make Azure natively. So here we got multiple volumes in different resource groups. Might be in different regions here. Some of them are large, some are small. But the same thing applies. Like it's as easy to use in Azure as it is in AWS, and will be in other providers as well.
Would you see that then turn up in your cloud volumes in the NetApp cloud portal you're in before?
Yes, eventually. We haven't opened that up yet.
So for
but
AWS,
eventually, yes,
that turns up at the moment.
If you choose to, because you need to essentially like allow us that access so we can, combine the two. So that's where the auth 0 thing comes in, where you essentially federate the API calls.
For the Azure piece?
Yes.
Yeah. So the AWS, you have to do it in there because you don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about, can you tell us the differences between what an NFS share and an SMB3 share will be from within the NetApp cloud volume context? Is there any kind of...
Really no, well, NFS v3 versus CIVs, they're obviously a big difference. I mean, you want to have CIVs for speed and performance and compliancy with Windows. That's pretty much what you're using it for. SMB obviously can be used in Linux and all of that, but that's your go-to protocol for the Windows workloads. On the NFS side, NFS 3 is really unauthenticated, so it's really behind the networking security that you have here. When you start a cloud volume, you are using it over a private IP, and only the VPC, if I talk like in AWS terms, only the VPC has access to that. Okay. Only your VPC. And that's protected all the way to the volume, even though this is a multi-tenant service. And the reason why we can do that is because of the software-based networking that's built into ONTAP and NetApp boxes, and the way that AWS and Azure they structure their networking security. Now, having said that, you want to be able to use these things equally wherever they are, right? I mean, I'm not going to focus more on that here, but essentially what we're doing now is just bringing the services to people where they are. So if they're in Azure, they want to use this in Azure. If they're in AWS, they're going to use it in AWS. And I compiled a few use cases for this, and I'll just let you look at it for a little while. LOB, line of business. So think about specific applications that matter to the company. We've got some buyers there, the key concerns, and you can see like in all those categories, or most of them at least, you're thinking about performance. They're thinking about real integration with the cloud provider. That's important. As developers, and we haven't been playing in that field before, I would say, like application developers are really going to like this, and I'll show you in a few minutes why I think they'll like it. But it's important to realize that like NetApp is used all over the world today to speed up things like continuous integration, continuous development, like build servers. Like that's where we've been playing. We haven't been playing in the public cloud doing that, but with like NetApp's plugin for Jenkins, it makes builds way faster. We've been playing internally with like Hadoop. With Hadoop and Cloud Volumes, way faster, uses less resources. Like there are very, very interesting use cases here that we'll talk about more when we can sort of talk about the customers that are using Cloud Volumes now. But we see a broad spectrum of buyers for this service, and I can tell you that the sort of interest in trying out Cloud Volumes on the different hyperscalers has been really, really high. So we are trying our hardest to actually put these services out in a public way as soon as we can. But as you can imagine, there's only a certain amount of hours in the day. So we're trying to get there as fast as we can.
Can you go over some more developer-oriented use cases?
Yes. So there are a number of ways that you would consume Cloud Volumes as a developer. One of the ways is NetApp has created a Docker plugin called Trident. And what Trident does on premise is that it automatically creates the internals that you need to be able to create volumes. So in NetApp speak, there's something called an SVM that's like a container, storage container for the volumes that you can create on top of that, right? So Trident, it's like a controller or like an engine for things like Kubernetes that automatically creates those volumes for you when you describe your application. So Trident will, for Cloud Volumes, do the same in the public cloud as it does on-prem. So we'll be able to deploy applications and automatically create persistent volumes based on the profile the user wants for the application. So if he's building a high-performance database-based application, he might choose the extreme level for Cloud Volumes just for the database. But you might use EBS, or you might use something slow for the application layer or the presentation layer of the application. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right. So is this? I'm just trying to kind of wrap my head around this, and
Yep.
I'm not as sophisticated as other people in the room, but I guess what I'm thinking about is this really a story where the core storage offering from an Amazon or Microsoft, so Amazon Cloud versus an Azure Cloud,
Yep.
is almost too basic of a building block, and so what's missing is that almost like a layer between it and where the application or where the developer really needs to tie into? It's more refined. I guess what I'm really getting at is, are we missing that refinement of the AWS and Azure storage building blocks? And that's really the problem that this is solving, is providing a much more refined way with some management in there too.
It's that, and it's actually like a number of factors. I like it how you put that, but it's actually a number of factors. It's the ability to do shared files, multi-read, multi-write, that just not available today, right? EFS. I'll show you why you don't want to use that versus Cloud Volumes. So it's a new feature that hasn't been available before, and people have been working around it like crazy. Like, you create all of these, all of these schedulers and stuff around storage to get around the problem that you can't just point things at the same storage. Like, it creates new DevOps problems to solve when we can just bring this to the table, and then you don't have to think about that. Like, it brings a new thing to, and it also brings new features like just the instant snapshot and clone. It makes a huge difference in multiple applications. Like, I'll give you an example, like in development, you have a build server and you're building an artifact. You're basically doing like a full build of your application. With NetApp and some plugins for something like Jenkins or GitLab or whatever you want to use, you can actually create a point in time with a snapshot that you can build on top of. So you don't have to start from scratch, right? And when you build an artifact and it's finished, you can snapshot it, and then you can instantly grab that and create a new volume for it just for that build process if you want to, and make the whole thing way quicker. So, and using replication between sites, if you've got distributed development teams, there's a whole lot of things you can do with this that you could not do before.
So I guess where I'm going with this was more of, we never had this problem with the on-prem structure, but this problem now exists because on-prem, you're never writing directly to a drive. You're writing to an NFS volume, right? Or a SIF volume.
Yeah, or ISO block.
That becomes that kind of interlayer that's missing in the traditional cloud offerings.
Because it's super hard to do. Believe me, that is the reason why it isn't there. And underneath a lot of these services, at least from like maybe the smaller public clouds and all that, they actually are using this. Like, they're using NetApp, they're using NFS underneath their thinly provisioned volumes and all that. They're not exposing it to the end users because it's hard. I mean, it's very hard to build. It's hard to maintain. Like, we've, as a company, and say we, because I've obviously been sipping the Kool-Aid here for 8 months, we have figured that out a long time ago. And that's interesting part of, like, now we can actually bring that to the table. And I think there's a lot of new applications and different ways of architecting big applications that we're going to see.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out that it creates a new role in cloud DevOps that kind of didn't exist. A new role or not necessarily a new role, but a new opportunity to provide a centralized within whether it's a PaaS or a development platform, a new layer of data services from a DevOps perspective, building more capability. I like your build process. That was a great example around just shared, something simple that we've had in enterprise for 35 years or more.
True.
Bringing it to cloud and giving it cloud scale is really interesting.
Yeah, and I'd like to show you guys a little bit on sort of where we can help. This is not a scientific test. I just wanted to show you because we were talking about EFS before. This is just a FIO test, which tests random read, random write. It took Cloud Volumes 52 seconds to finish this. It took EFS 16 and a half minutes. I thought this might be a fluke. Let's try it out. Like I say, I'm not really a storage guy. I'm a developer. I like optimized things, performance. I want things to run smoothly. So I thought, let's try it with against an SSD, a local SSD or an EBS SSD on an extra large instance. Here I'm using SSD on an M3 2x large, and Cloud Volumes was 10 times faster to complete the random read, random write. So not only, and by the way, if you put 1 terabyte on Cloud Volumes versus 1 terabyte of provisioned IOPS SSDs on AWS, Cloud Volumes is still cheaper.
Is that using an EBS optimized instance? Provisioned IOPS?
It's a high optimized, I can't remember if it's optimized storage or optimized compute, but it's high network, and that's just the general, what's it called, the general purpose SSD.
Yeah,
So,
it's not.
and on the cost side, when I like did that cost comparison, I just took like 3,000 IOPS, 8 terabyte, and compared the cost of provisioned IOPS SSD, which is their most expensive and fastest version, versus the
General purpose.
versus Cloud Volumes. I forget the service level, the premium service level.
I'm just curious about the architecture that sits behind Cloud Volumes.
Yep.
Is that using AWS primitives to build the Cloud Volume service?
It's a giant black box. I can't tell you that.
You're not allowed to tell us.
No.
How is that presented
Well, can I ask you a
networking
stupid
wise?
question?
Go ahead.
Why is Cloud Volumes cheaper? Now, I think that might lead to be that I don't. I mean, I look at it and I look at the standard service that probably doesn't use stuff that's as performant as what you're using. Amazon's keeping all the margin there, right?
Yep.
I assume that with Cloud Volumes, there's something going to Amazon, something going to NetApp. Why is it cheaper?
How do you compete? Like, we are new to this game. We need to compete. We need to make a service that's highly available, highly performant. So the trick here, and I don't think it's going to be a secret, but the trick here is that NetApp has a number of storage efficiencies that it can gain from like dedupe, compression, all that. To make the service cheaper.
Yeah, so it's the data services that run
Right.
on top of it.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
got it. So
They're taking advantage of their own data
30
services.
cents a gig, is that
Yes,
effective?
per month.
Or is that
That is
raw?
That is what you would see if you do LS minus L in your Linux
Okay,
map.
so it's effective.
Yes.
So I'm paying 30 cents a gig on the, okay, so that's how it's.
Yes. However, so we are making the service cheaper by owning the efficiency that we gain from the multi-tenancy, right?
Right. So,
But you are gaining the instant snapshots and clones with the efficiency.
and so there is a risk to NetApp, though, and Amazon, I guess, maybe not as much with Amazon, that if you're storing stuff that has sucky, that's my word of the week, reduction capability, you know, stuff that's already compressed or that's already that's not in good form, that you're going to end up not making much, if anything.
It has to be
Or
the
some use.
snap.
Yes.
It's going to have to balance out over the customer base.
Yep.
You're saying
Okay.
that NetApp isn't going to make anything.
I'm trying to
On an individual customer,
Yeah,
let's
I know
say
it's not.
if an individual customer isn't using snapshots, but they're just throwing like all images and they can't, all unique images,
Right.
they can't be compressed, can't be deduped, then
So I'll make kind of a bold statement and say, I think you kind of have to do that because at the end of the day, someone else is going to figure out a way around that. So why not just cut them off at the pass and just say, look, here's the reality. We're going to get there. Let's just get there. And all of these other pieces, and
I'm not saying it's bad. I just want to understand the business model. That's it.
Well,
So, and I'll tell you,
it's Jevon's paradox, right? So
I don't
you
know
get
what that means.
the cost down. So
I have a
low
nephew
that
named Javon.
you use it more,
But
lower the cost.
you lower the cost to the point that more people start to use it.
Oh, no, I get
And
it.
then more people start to use it,
And you
and
can
the
bring the
reality.
cost down on scale.
That's right.
Total volume
Understood.
goes up.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. It's one of
Or
my
you could
favorite
just do
paradoxes.
you could follow the Amazon model, which is just make sure you keep growing fast enough that as long as everyone keeps clapping, the fairy stays alive.
Yes. So another reason why what I can say about the pricing, I'm glad you think it's too cheap. That's great.
Oh, I never said that.
Well, you have to think about maybe I wasn't clear enough in the beginning. When I say Amazon started with S3 and EC2, and you can build everything else on top of that, think of Cloud Volumes the same way. This is we're building the foundation for a ton of other services that add value and also create a lot more revenue for NetApp.
Just on data volumes, a couple of things.
Yep.
Can I mount, or is there an option in the future to mount a volume that I'm presenting into AWS also into Azure? Or, once the Azure service is...
From our perspective, you can do whatever you want. What you would need to do, and I'm not condoning it, is that you would need to open up a network
Directly from your service, I can't do that. Where I'm seeing the app volume, the volumes in your cloud service.
So there's like, because it's a protocol, it's the same with like EFS. You can mount EFS on your desktop at home. It's going to be terrible performance, but you can do it.
I'm just wondering about the egress and ingress things we were talking about. If actually, where I'm mounting that, the volume lives in NetApp, and I'm mounting that separately from each service.
So the volume on Cloud Volumes, it lives in each hyperscaler.
Yeah.
I can tell you that.
So you wouldn't be able to necessarily do that natively.
It's technically possible. I wouldn't.
But you'd be mounting it from AWS across
I would try it, but just out of curiosity. But yeah.
I noticed that the mount path, it was a private IP address.
Yes, always.
They're using VPC peering to create that connection, or do you have to reserve a block within your VPC to consume the cloud volume?
It's different between cloud providers. Some opt for peering, some opt for actually peered subnets. Not all of them support that, but so yes. The reason why I don't go like, it's like this and this and this and this, not because it's a huge secret, but because it might change. Like right now we're in private preview. Some of it is running in like direct connect and on your own VLAN, but NetApp bears the cost of that, like for testing purposes. Some might actually like live in the data center and be right next to the other services. So I can't speak to like
is that IP address
which is which, but yeah.
Is that highly available? So say in the AWS,
yes,
it's that IP address. If I lose a AZ, that's still going to work in the other availability zones.
So it's the fault region, what do you want to call it? The fault region is the region. Like it's a regional based
like S3 or something. So
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So the actual implementation is spanning availability zones. So you can lose an AZ, still have connectivity, but if you lose the region,
and you're making that IP address highly available as well. So so underneath, you're doing a similar thing to S3. You're replicating that.
Yeah. So technically we're using features from NetApp that has sort of software-based IP load balancing. Internally.
Sure. Cool.
All right. I'm running out of time, I think, but I got a really cool thing to show you guys. So two things. When I talk about three things: orchestrating and integrating. Obviously, we had to go with like open APIs. So we got an API for everything, not just this, but also for Cloud Sync, even for Cloud Central, so you can like manage some of the user stuff, for SaaS backup, eventually for AltaVault as a service, which we're calling Cloud Backup. So that takes care of like the developer-centric or the automation operations engineers, right? They want to be able to do this. You might want to tie this into your own tools, right? Your own dashboards and all of that. So you'll be able to do that. How you get your data to the volume, you could really achieve in many ways. We've already introduced one way, which is Cloud Sync. And with Cloud Sync, you create a data sync relationship. And just for the fun of it, and also to show you sort of how we have integrated, let me quickly show you what that looks like. To copy this again. Logged out. A little bit of timeout on the service here. Now I'm back in. So now I have my volume here, but I want to get data to it. So I could get data to it in a number of ways. One of them is with Cloud Sync, which is a file-based sync service. So because it's has that token-based API in Cloud Central, we've actually integrated it directly here in this UI. But I want to show it to you like in its standalone form, and then I'll come back here and show you the relationship that I've created. So let's go over to the Cloud Sync portal. And when I get here, the only thing I have to do now is decide where I'm going to get my data from. So I have a number of data sources, NFS, EFS, CIFS, or an S3 bucket. I'm going to go with S3 bucket. Now, this is going to use my credentials that I gave CloudSync when I signed up for it. The signing up for it part was basically what I did in, I did that previously in the Cloud Data Volumes UI. Essentially what you do, you launch what we call a broker. It's basically a VM that acts as the intermediary in the sync process. So I'm going to select an S3 bucket, and I'm going to send that data over to my NFS server. This is my broker. It's a VM running in the same VPC, and this is completely automated. I don't have to tune this or anything. It just comes up.
What's the role of that broker? It just acts as a gateway in?
Yes. So it's, it's the simplest form here because now I'm kind of doing stuff within AWS to AWS resources. But in some cases where you're taking stuff on-prem to the public cloud, you would launch a broker within your own data center. And the broker is so you don't have to poke holes into firewalls, and basically you're just orchestrating, getting the files, deduping them, and doing some stuff, and then checking with the remote to see if anything's changed and only sending the changes. So it's kind of like rsync, but a little bit more specific for these purposes, like S3 and all that. But you need that component to be able to get past those firewalls and without sort of risking security. And I need it here in this case because I want it in my VPC. My VPC is completely blocked for everything else. So I've got a bucket here, Eiki bucket. Select that. Let me just go back into Cloud Volumes because I want to have both open. So here I'm going to just copy that IP address. So you can imagine now it's just copying that IP address, and I'm going to stream that bucket into my Cloud Volume. This could be coming from on-prem. It could be coming from a completely different hardware vendor, essentially from anywhere. So now it's discovered my exports. It's discovered my Cloud Volumes. I'm going to select the one that I want. Click Continue. Create the relationship.
And you can drive this through an API, I assume?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to show you this here because in the Cloud Volumes UI for AWS, we also have it there. And we can do that because when I log into Cloud Volumes, I can get a token, an API token, for this service as well. So I don't have to re-register for Cloud Sync or anything like that. I can just use it, and that makes orchestrating the full NetApp Cloud Suite, this as easy as something like AWS API and secret keys for everything. So that started. I'm probably replicating about a little less than a terabyte of data there. And let's let that finish.
That last 1% always takes the longest, doesn't it?
Always, right?
The Windows algorithm for calculating.
So what we can do, I can go and check here if we've received some data. So for my machine learning.
So you talked about other vendors in the future. What's on the list?
So with Cloud Sync or with what?
Just in general.
So in general, what we want to be able to do, obviously, is collaborate with multiple different solution providers to optimize their solutions for Cloud Volumes, and also create our own versions of applications that might be popular or useful for our customers, and make it easy for them to consume those. On the Cloud Sync side, we're already sucking data out of all different types of vendor storage systems, and public cloud stuff like S3 or EFS. And yep, go ahead.
We can relate AWS and Azure with Snapboard or SnapMirror, if I well understood.
Yes.
Cloud volume are based on ONTAP, that's right?
Yes.
So if we want to create a multi-cloud app, if we want to have real-time queries on a multi-cloud, do we have to create a multi-cloud through SnapVault and SnapMirror, which I understood that it was for backup, or with Cloud Sync?
All right, so the SnapMirror for the backup that I was talking about was really a single product within NetApp. It's called AltaVault.
Yeah.
And that allows you to back up like massive amounts of data and turning it into a lot smaller amount of data in S3 as an archive, as an updatable archive, right?
Yeah.
So we haven't rolled out the SnapMirror capabilities for cloud volumes yet. Like we will. So that's definitely on our roadmap. It's definitely one of the key things for us. But right now, the only data mover service that we have directly working with cloud volumes is Cloud Sync. But yeah, SnapMirror is coming. It probably won't be called like SnapMirror. It would just be called Cloud.
And in this case, you're going to manage an API gateway between the multi-cloud.
Yes. So the UI that I'm showing here is multi-cloud. This is multi-cloud capable. So, for example, through the API on Cloud Central, you can create an ONTAP in Azure or in AWS. And the same thing will go for cloud volumes and all of these things. So I see that it's basically done copying here. The 1%, I don't know what that is, but let me see. So I've got my machine learning copy here of hot dog, not hot dog images. And I can see the data is all in there. Let me see. And now let's say that I wanted to actually use this in an application. So going from here then to an actual application, maybe a machine learning application, or maybe just a database application, how can I do that? And Nick brought up a really cool topic before on the developer side. We can use Trident, we can use a number of different ways to actually consume this. And NetApp thinks that, one of the ways that people would want to consume this is through containerized applications. So let me show you what that looks like. And this is something that we want to release as a service, but right now it's an internal feature, and it's actually kind of how the services are built already. So let me switch here to another environment.
But just to be clear here, we're talking about potentially having two different apps running on two different servers, two different containers, both accessing that at the same time?
Yep.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yep. Or different containers within the same app. Because as you will see here, there's a number of ways of looking at an application. What we can do today and what we want to roll out as a service is to manage and fully orchestrate applications based on Kubernetes. So where we're going with this, this is kind of like a preview for that, is that if I as an application architect or I as a developer or even a consumer of an application, I want to get quickly to an app that's fairly well known, but I don't have the time or I want to customize it quickly, we have built an application orchestration layer for that particular purpose. So think about what I'm going to show you as like the super quick start for getting ready in the cloud with applications, containerized applications, something that automatically uses cloud volumes without any sort of configuration on your side, right? And that's because we have those API capabilities. So this here is our application orchestration layer. Right now, I'm starting a GitLab cluster. So if you don't know GitLab, it's made out of multiple components. Actually, it's what we call a 3-tier application, which means that it's got a database, it's got a front end, and these things need to be scaled separately. Like they can be scaled separately and they need to be scaled separately. So for example, when you're running something like GitLab or Jenkins, you've got build processes, and the build processes, they need compute, right? They need compute to compile code. And what if you could simply automatically scale the cluster based on the number of builds that you want? Well, you can do that. But how are you going to provision all the volumes for it on demand? You're going to call the storage admin and have him figure out how to do it. And now he has to figure out how to do it in AWS as well. And you have to configure the app and all that. No. You use an application template that knows how to scale. And we're lucky enough to have participated in a small way, I would say, even though we've been working with Kubernetes for a long time, to discover this fantastic framework for building not just microservices like a lot of people are using it for, but for really stateful applications and all the way up to big data, machine learning, down to high performance databases. I could, for example, just run MySQL, the Linux version of MySQL on this, and have cloud volumes underneath. So the way that we do that is by using a format called Helm. And what Helm gives me is pre-made applications that have a defined set of sub-components that can scale on their own. And just to give you an example, I'll start a component here that's called Dask. I like that. So Dask is a distributed, it's a platform for distributed machine learning. So I had a machine learning data set there, hot dog, not hot dog, if somebody watches Silicon Valley. But Dask is something that I can just, if I have this up and running, and I point it to that volume, now I can start creating just analytics and just machine learning algorithms on top of that. So to run Dask, the only thing I need to do here is select it. I can tune it if I want to. There's a number of things that I can tune here. It's got a web UI and all that. Oops, I clicked the hide, click back, sorry about that. But in reality, all of the applications that come up here, they are supposed to be sort of, choose and run, right? So I don't have to tune in at all. But when I click launch, what this does, and this will essentially be running on your account. So let's say I chose an application that I wanted to run in AWS. The application might be made specifically for AWS, so it might not run in all the different cloud providers, but you might have applications that are completely agnostic to where they run. But what happens when I run it is that it creates the storage, it creates those cloud volumes for me, it creates servers if I don't have a cluster before, it creates load balancers, and it completely manages the scaling of the application based on whatever custom scaling properties I want to give it. So right now it's in pending mode, but one of the things you can see here is that it's got a number of services. So if any of you are familiar with Kubernetes, services are kind of like web addresses for a particular application. They might be internal or they might be external. And some of the things that are challenging with something like Kubernetes on the public cloud, if you're running your own clusters and you need specialized things, is actually configuring load balancing, configuring storage. But here, you don't have to do any of that. Simply launch an application. Once it launches, it pulls all the Docker containers, and I can actually peer into each Docker container specifically if I want to. I can even log into a container with a console, so I can debug this on the fly. I can manipulate the replicas and the scaling of the application. And once it's running, because we're tracking all the health information and everything here, once it's running, I can simply click Services, click on that external service load balancer IP, and now I have my application running and ready to use on top of Cloud Volumes.
How does this fit into that sort of data fabric strategy, that piece you talked about? Because this is, to me, this is a massive departure from what you were talking about previously. Like your kind of NetApp storage and enabling that storage and data in the cloud, and now you're talking about orchestration and running these apps.
So what this really is pure Kubernetes. We're not manipulating Kubernetes in any way. You could choose to use the Kubernetes cluster that, like AKS or the native Kubernetes services of the cloud provider. What we've done here, though, is handle the data management piece for you. And one of the biggest reasons we want to do this is so that you, as a company, can do things like snapshot the whole application stack at once. Create a test version of your full infrastructure with one click. That's why we're doing it. We're making it super easy for companies to get on board with containerized applications, with existing templates for applications, and to be able to use this new technology without having to dive into the fine details right away. So marketing could go in here, click on WordPress, get WordPress up, but that's not a huge value for the data side of the company. But in my use case before, when I brought a data set to the public cloud into a cloud volume, now I can suddenly use that either through this, or I could use a data connector like we have for HT Insight or Databricks, and plug the data into those value-adding services. So this is kind of where we're heading, and I think probably everybody in here is thinking like, wait, like they're a storage company. Why are they doing applications? We're not a storage company. We're a data management company, and that's the message I really want to get across. And we're going to do some pretty interesting things.
That's still an interesting thing to get across and translate. So you're a data management company.
Yes.
That doesn't necessarily mean you need to do application orchestration.
Right.
I understand you're adding some certain bits to it, but it's get rid of the storage piece, but data management doesn't necessarily leap to, with data management, therefore we need to orchestrate Kubernetes.
True. You're absolutely right. But think about it this way. If our customers can bring data to the public cloud in cloud volumes that's performant, and we or third parties, partners, can bring a template for an application they need, and it's automatically connected to the cloud volumes that they have, that's a big value proposition for them. Nobody's going to do it for us, right? We have the connectors like Trident for different systems. You can use it in Mesos, you can use it in plain Docker, but we have a vision that we will be able to create much more value faster if we push this thing out first, right? So we're not trying to go ahead and compete with different application orchestration layers. We just want to make sure that this value proposition is a reality for customers of Cloud Volume and an additional value to Cloud Volumes once we push it out as a service. So it is, in fact, part of that. Just skip these. It is, in fact, part of that data management service vertical called data integration and orchestration.
Right.
So,
I sort of see that you gave an example using your service to spin up the Helm chart and use Cloud Volumes, but the Cloud Volumes API is open for anyone to use.
Yes.
So it doesn't have to be
no, not at all.
Web portal doing all the spin up. That was
VMs,
a really good
Rancher,
example of doing it.
native cloud services, yeah.
But you could have an example which is, here's my CloudFormation template or something or whatever that spins up these Kubernetes or spins up some EC2 instances and connects to that Cloud Volume and shows that. But NetApp has taken that, well, not just one step, that's several steps further to build your own orchestration piece. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it's a big leap from here's NFS and a cool way to spin up NFS and these advantages of performance to now we can orchestrate and build all these things. And that might just be lost in that bullet point, because I don't think anyone reading data integration and orchestration dash application reads that as we will spin up Kubernetes and Helm and all these and have those pieces from that.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think from my personal you build things that you need. Like you build things that are not available or are not, answering the that you have, right? The orchestration piece here on the data, because what you're seeing now is the application side, and I can't go too deep into like what's next after that, but think about it like this is, all data management services, and we're getting to that elusive, data fabric vision that we want people to have as a tangible thing. I don't know if I explain it correctly, but we're trying there, and that's why I'm showing it as a preview. We're trying there to answer a need that people have on application and development side particularly, but also as a solution to some of the optimizations that we know are possible, but that knowledge is not, available to everybody today. So instead of trying to teach it to everybody, let's create those templates so that you get that benefit right away. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get to. But
I guess when we were talking about SnapMirror and Egress and Ingress and how you manage it and those kind of pieces, like people trying to get their head around how they might use this and do these things, and what you're kind of putting this in place, going, well, this is how you could use it. One way to use it is that. Yeah, and we'll spin that all up for you, and you can just start using it, and we'll do the optimization and things underneath, and you don't really have to worry about some of those.
Or a partner.
Or a partner.
Yes. All right, I think I've exhausted my time and probably everybody's patience. So,
it was really good.
It was good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening. I know I'm a startup guy, so I might ramble and go in different places, but I hope you sort of feel my excitement for what's coming in NetApp and think that we can actually do cool cloud stuff.
That's a preview. When is this?
Yes.
Like what you've just shown us, is that something I can go and?
So it will definitely coalesce with some of the other products that we're pushing out. So we've got a number of interesting things that not only will, like the SnapMirror things and that, but also things that will help you understand why you should move stuff to cloud, or you should move stuff back. Like we're thinking all of that. Thinking about all of those use cases, and so we won't roll it out until we have a critical mass of other services that will follow and sort of we use internally to build this. So soon, but not like right now.
And that's for all the stuff you've just demoed. That's
Cloud Volume is available right now.
Right,
Cloud Sync is available right now. SaaS Backup is available right now. So Cloud Backup, the application side. And more things are
the compute orchestration, that orchestration piece, is that available now?
No, so the compute orchestration, the VM orchestration, metal and all that, that part is basically QStack, what NetApp bought with acquisition of Greencloud, and we've not released that yet.
Can I ask? You started this presentation with a reference to being the pirates of NetApp.
Yeah.
There's two sides to this. What's the response of the wider company to this kind of innovation?
Yeah.
And there's a generation of people who have been in this company for a while who are used to NetApp behaving in one particular way. This is quite a big departure from what NetApp has done in the past. What kind of cultural changes are happening internally so there is any resistance to this sort of change?
So that's kind of the surprising thing. Like, everybody's on board with this because it's not a singular step away from. We're not stepping away from on-prem or Flash or anything like that. It's all part of that data fabric. And I would really like to show you all the stuff that we've got planned, but it will start to make more sense when we start to show you open all the packages and all the presents that we're trying to make for our customers. And
go ahead, show the roadmap slides.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe we're fine. Yeah.
Maybe over drinks later, I'll cave and show you some stuff.
We're venture capitalists.
Except that doesn't need venture capital.
No, but to answer your question, NetApp has recently gone through a complete change internally. So the business units have been, the company has been carved up into these business units, and the cloud data services unit is just focused on cloud first. And that's our only mission, cloud first, play with the big hyperscalers, but we have to use all the products.
They're net new people who are new to NetApp, they have no connection?
No, it's like the ingredients for the cloud business unit are, tried and tested software like OCI, ONTAP, Insights, that's like a monitoring analytics solution that's widely used. Things like AltaVault, which is the Snap mirror or a backup to S3. There's SaaS backup, cloud control. There's the whole QStack team that's now I think it's almost doubled now since the acquisition. And there's a number of different teams that were in other places in NetApp, but have sort of come now together underneath the umbrella that is Cloud Central. And we're all working towards a single controllable API and orchestrating all of these things together. So to be able to do that, we actually rely on things like a version of ONTAP that's specifically built for us, that has way shorter build cycles or release cycles than the sort of public release of ONTAP has. So we are working at a different pace, I would say, than the rest of the sort of traditional products in the company. But at the same time, we couldn't do any of this if we didn't have ONTAP and the excellent software developers that we have in all the departments. So politically correct answer and the actual reality is that we're all trying to get to the same place because people know that, we as a company, unlike most of our competitors, have realized that, we have to be a cloud company.
Yeah. I must admit, I was a bit skeptical at the beginning, but I've gradually warmed more to it as we've gone along.
But you have to just look at, if you look at the financial reports and all that, you can see the cloud business is going up for NetApp. But, since Anthony came on board, since Jonsi, my VP, and Brendan, and all of the sort of leadership within the cloud business unit, started working on these services, we basically, George Kurian and the head directors of NetApp, they had to change the structure of the company so we're aligned to be able to do this. So you got your next next generation data center, HCI stuff. You've got ONTAP, and we've got SolidFire and all of these. But we're all sort of trying to get to that common platform. And it's going to take a while, but I think our release track record now since joining has been pretty good.
And the sign up that you've got on AWS, anyone could sign up for that currently?
Yes. So we did when we announced the private previews, we did the signups for that. The private preview for Azure is functionally over, and we're now gearing towards public preview. So the signups that we would collect now would go into the public preview pool.
Right.
And I'm not the right person to ask how many companies or companies or individuals or whichever we're gonna bring into that. But there's anybody can sign up. And we do have on the billing side. So there's a slight difference now between. We offer two models really now. We're offering bundles. So we got what we call controlled availability, where we prefer customers that want to have capacity pool that they might use for as many volumes as they want, and then can pre-buy that during the discounted sort of preview time that we're working with them. And then we have the on-demand or the metered billing, which is the 30 cents per gig. And it's 30 cents per gig because that's the premium one. And then we'll be rolling out a lower performance tier, one, maybe two lower performance tiers, because I know some of you might be thinking if this would be usable for backup or DR, absolutely. We will have a version or a service level for those applications too. Cheaper.
This might sound like a silly question, but I know VMware has announced a partnership with AWS.
Yeah.
What's the chance that an ESX host in AWS could mount an NFS volume to NetApp?
Could do that. Yeah. If we can share the same VPC, they can do it. And that opens up interesting things do you want to do virtual desktops or?
In fact, I think
there's a number of things you can do once this is when you have this as a possibility, it opens up many new things that are interesting.
Can offer you.
Well, you could do iSCSI as well if you really wanted to.
iSCSI in the cloud?
Yeah, there's one of the NetApp things that does iSCSI.
Wow.
Yeah, not cloud volumes, but the
ONTAP cloud you can do iSCSI, yeah.
ONTAP cloud does iSCSI. So you could totally redo everything that you do on site in the cloud for some insane reason.
Yeah, but there's an advantage to that. I mean, you can laugh and scoff at it, but it's part of what creates the friction to legacy footprints adopting cloud. I think this is, maybe I'm just, again, I'm looking at this from I think a pretty different perspective than most people, but I think this is really interesting. As an enterprise guy who's looking at ways to kind of change things up, but seeing the hurdles and what creates that friction, I'm seeing ways that this just kind of smooths that along. I mean, you've got some work to do. I'm not saying this is just a slam dunk, but
that's cool, man.
It sure seems like you're heading in the right direction.
That's great to hear. Yeah.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Ask a question? It's out of the presentation. If I were understood, you're working on the Trident project, the open source Trident project. It should be storage orchestrator. So what will be the difference with Kubernetes? Because Kubernetes is going to be the orchestrator for containers. And so what about only storage orchestrator? I don't really understand the goal of the Trident project.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So essentially, the downside of doing containerized applications is that storage kind of isn't an after the fact bolt onto it. When I say that, and the reason why is because containers in general were thought of first for stateless microservices. So pretty much something that does something, but something else is taking care of the persistent data that it needs, right? Because we want to get things up fast. We want to run it in multiple places. We want to have load balancing and all of that, right? Then we come to like the need and wanting to have stateful applications like databases, like some processing that you leave a result behind and you want to use that later on. Then you had to figure out how to get volumes on Docker. Docker being the first container engine first. Everybody here has been in cloud, obviously. There are different container engines, but they were the first to package it in a usable format. So there have been a number of sort of container orchestration engines built. Like there was Docker Swarm, there's Mesos, there's Rancher with Cattle, and there's not a ton, but there are a few orchestrators out there. Now, the problem with like deploying a containerized application is that you have like lots of containers, because each container is just supposed to do like one thing really well, right? So how do you run all these and contain them and give them data and all that? That's where the schedulers orchestrator came in. And to figure out a way to bring them data, projects like Kubernetes started figuring out things like, as an application developer, you are different from the storage admin, or you're different from actually what you call the application admin. So the application admin, he would create persistent storage for you, and then say, like, here's an NFS address, put that into your application and we'll be fine. What Trident does is that instead of doing that manual process, which can be faulty, it's not automated. Once you have a volume connected through something like Trident, you can snapshot it automatically. You can build policies around it, right? So what Trident does specifically for Kubernetes is that when I define my application, I say, okay, I want my SQL database and the volume for that I need. I don't necessarily care what format it is in. I'm going to define that it's read write or read multiple, read once, depending on how I'm going to access it. I just say I want a 10 gig volume. So instead of having that storage admin figure out how to give me 10 gigs of volume, I create what's called a persistent volume claim, and that just is part of the application definition. And once that's in the system, Kubernetes, with the help of Trident, will go ahead into Cloud Volumes API, create a big enough volume for you, and not just that, it will also mount it for you and attach it to that container. So taking away like multiple steps to make it super easy to consume. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So it's similar to what I did in the terminal before,
yeah,
but completely automated.
I was reading, but very quick about this project. So could I consider this tool to manage decentralized storage?
No, it's not a storage driver. It's simply an orchestrator.
Okay.
Yeah. So it doesn't create any. It only can use APIs. So it doesn't create any storage. It's not like a distributed object storage or anything like that.
Yeah. Thanks.